Kia ora koutou and welcome to the second of the CIPS exam techniques workshop. This follows on from the general approach to CIPS self-study, which is already on YouTube. This session is going to be in two parts. The first will cover the unseen case studies, which are at D3 Sourcing, AD1 Management, AD2 Managing Risks and PD1 Leadership. And in that half of the session I'm going to cover off how these differ from the straight essay-based exam questions and hints and tips for exam success, and those as always based on my own experience. The second half of the session is going to cover the pre-release case studies, and there are two of those, one at AD3 Improving Competitiveness and one at PD3, which is the Strategic Supply Chain Management. Approaches to the study that do differ from the other case studies and the exam technique for these exams. These ones are open book, so they do differ from other exams in the CIPS series. So first of all, your unseen case study. This is the one that you get to see for the first time in the exam. There is very little in these exams that differs in your approach to your study and to the learning outcomes and the way that you approach the exam. Making sure that you understand the material is key. Past papers are going to give you a good insight into the types of questions that get asked, but don't question spot. That's really important, particularly in the case study exam, because the questions do relate back to the case study. Do also read the Assessors Reports. They'll give you the hints and tips, both on the specific exam questions and areas that are covered, but also on the common areas that people have made mistakes on in the past. Okay. There are some key differences, and the main one is, quite obviously, you have a case study. It's about 500 words long, which is about a page, and it's your chance to show how you can apply the theory that you've learned from the textbook to a specific business. Now, do understand you're not expected to be an expert in that business or a particular sector. The information and the background that you need will be in the case study. More time in the exam is needed for reading the case study. You're not expected therefore to write as much in your answers, but what you answer does need to be specific and concise, so remove the waffle. D3 is the only exam in all of the exam diploma series where you have 5 learning outcomes and therefore 5 question sets instead of 4. So when you get to the exam, do make sure you understand what's being presented to you. CIPS recommends about 20 minutes to read through and understand the case study. You might need to read through that a couple of times. Make sure you factor this into the time that you allow for your answers. As everybody's reading speed is different, do practice with past papers and time yourself. You may read slightly slower or slightly faster than the CIPS recommended limit. I've put up on the screen the recommended reading time from CIPS. So as with essay-based exams, do make sure that once you finish reading through, you write out the times that you've got and the times that you'll change over from exams. From exam question to exam question. That gives you a particular time in which you'll stop writing one question and move on to the next. This is really important because you get more marks at the start of a question than you do at the end, and there is little point in losing out on time at the end of the exam because you've tried to fit in a couple of extra sentences. If you have time at the end, you can always go back and add in more information. So as you're reading through the case study, it's really good to highlight any areas that you think are key. You will see keywords that come through from your learning outcomes. So in the July exam that I've got up on the board, we have things like Incoterms. We've got liquidity and profitability. Those are things that should be jumping out at you from the study that you've done. If you are going to use a highlighter, do only use that in your question paper. If you want to make any emphasis on your answer paper, use underlining because the papers get photocopied as part of the marking process and any highlighting disappears. So when you're looking at the exam questions, remember to note the command words and the marks allocated for each question. Those are going to give you guidance as to the depth of information that are needed. As with all exam questions, if you're asked for a number of items, then give that number and not more, not less. You won't get any extra marks for putting in 5 requirements instead of the 4 that are on this paper. The examiners have to stop marking at the end of your 4th answer, even if you think your first one might not be quite right. Similarly, if you only put 3 in, then you can't get the full marks, no matter how good those 3 answers are. One of the key differences in the case study exam paper is that instead of bringing in your own knowledge and your own examples from work that you've been doing or papers that you've read, you need to refer back to the case study. So in this case, it was the Zoological Society of London, and the question on Incoterms asks you to use examples to illustrate the purpose of Incoterms. Here, you take a look at the Zoological Society of London and the rationale that they're using Incoterms and just try and tie it back into their environment. However, you do need to draw in your own knowledge and study in answering the questions. It's not an exercise in just parroting back the information that's in the book, so do be prepared to draw on or potentially make assumptions around the information that you've been given. And that's really it. It's not a huge difference to the other exams that you're sitting. Your timing is important, and remembering that you need to relate your answers back to the case study. And that's really about it. So do you have any questions? Anything that's burning?
I guess my question would be, sometimes you sort of find a bit of comfort in having a case study in front of you to refer back to rather than your own knowledge just falling in the air.
Yeah.
What did you find the sort of benefit of having a case study approach rather than just questions and answers?
I actually I quite enjoyed the case study exams. That was because it gave me triggers. It gave me, okay, this is how I need to think about Incoterms. It's actually given me a little bit of an example of the types of things that, the importance and priorities of the team, and therefore I can tie that back to the Incoterms. I'm not having to sit and go, I've never actually used Incoterms in my real life. I'm having to draw solely on what I've studied and articles that I've read. It actually gives you those triggers. It is useful to have something defined, a defined boundary to work in. But otherwise, I'm afraid I just probably took it as another of those exams that you've got to pass. There is further support on the web links provided. These range from the CIPS' guide for diploma exams. I've given the higher level web page here because that also includes some generalised hints and tips for the entire exam series. I really recommend that you read the guide through and take account of the hints and tips that they've got in there. There are 2 LinkedIn groups. CIPS Students Australasia, which is run by Fiona McDonald, who is the current CIPS Australasia student representative, and the CIPS Student Members, which is a UK run by a lady called Sue, who is a tutor in the UK, but it does have global coverage for its students. There's also, for your open book exam, a really good article on supply management on how to prepare for that exam, and I really recommend reading that through as well. So thank you very much for coming along today, and good luck in the exam.